Hi, Jordan. Thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Allison.
Yeah, I'm amped to have you here. I have known you for quite some time. We'll get into that later. But yeah, when we decided to have you on this episode, you joked and said that you'd only be on if we could exchange, what did you call it? I think you said an awkward 2-minute post-pandemic niceties about, how you survived the last year.
Yeah, you forgot how to talk to people. I don't know what your mouth looks like anymore. I don't know what anybody's mouth looks like anymore.
But I'm going to one-up you. How about them cicadas?
Oh, yeah.
There you go. That's what everyone's talking about.
There we go. Yeah, it's the new thing.
Actually, I just hopped over a bunch of them today. It was pretty gross. Ugh. But anyway, let's get into it. So today we are talking about flipping homes in the DC metropolitan region. And so we go way back. Like I said, I met you, what was it, 5-6 years ago, maybe?
About 6 years ago, I think, yeah.
Yeah. I was working at a different brokerage with an agent whose primary source of business was from developers who purchased houses that needed to be, renovated, and then she sold them. So what we would usually call a flip. Mm-hmm. I would like to say that she did very high-end flips such as yours. They weren't like the crap botched flip jobs. So thank you for putting out some beautiful product. But really, since then, I can't go more than a week probably without somebody telling me that they want to get into flipping homes. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that look that you just made is kind of the look I make. When, of course, you never want to crap on someone's dreams and say, no or don't do it. But it's hard.
Yeah, it's very hard.
Flipping a home is a business, right?
It is, and it's a competitive one. I mean, especially in the city, but all across, America, the world. I mean, there are people who do it casually. There are people who do it professionally. And we're all going for the same small little pool of homes. And it just gets a little crazy at times.
It does. Yeah. So, and I've even had people come my way. They've gone through like these classes. Basically, I can't remember the names of them. It's like you get these books and they tell you how to flip a home. And it's, it's almost as if they're talking to anybody in any market. Like, hey, if you subscribe to this program, then you too can flip a home. Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure that they're costly, those programs, but also it's not DC, right? I mean, like, it's important, I think, to recognize that this market is a saturated market anyway. If you want to get into the flipping game, this is a tough place to do it. So I thought we could have an episode today and talk about, how do you flip a home? What really does it entail? Maybe it is for some people, and maybe it's not for most people.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And I guess I'll say, to kind of piggyback off that, I didn't think I would be one of those people. I really didn't know that flipping was going to be a business, because I don't really consider what I do flipping. But when you talk about it in those terms, it really is. I mean, I try to consider myself a builder and a developer. I care very much about the product that I present to a buyer. I think we were joking about it earlier that I don't like to get late night phone calls about somebody with a roof leak or something like that. So, and those have happened, and sometimes it's unavoidable. But, at the end of the day, I like to consider myself a professional. I think getting into this market is particularly difficult, just because at the end of the day, what are we really talking about? I mean, there's a lot of money involved in this stuff, and people can really get in a lot of trouble because of the competitive aspect of finding these houses. You're not always going to win these bids, and you're going to get frustrated when you bid on 1, 2, 3, 5 houses. So what do you do next? You overbid, because you're like, well, if I'm going to do this professionally, I need a stream of revenue. Or if I'm doing this casually, why do I keep bidding on these houses and losing? What's the point? I want to just get something and see if I can set the market and become the next highest price house in that neighborhood, right? Right. So, I don't know. I don't know how it works out that we happen to be in one of the most expensive markets in the country, but we are. And with that comes a lot of responsibility to what you're selling. I mean, I would want to represent myself as a quality builder to somebody building a $200,000 home versus a $1.2 million home. I mean, I think you're really talking about the same stuff, right? It just the value of the home is what people are willing to pay for it. So, to kick it back to you, I mean, I really feel like we have seen a lot of the same people. We run into the same people that are offering on the same properties all the time, and there's a competitive aspect of it. But It's also, what's your formula? Like, how do you determine I'm willing to pay X for this house? I think that the costs are going to be Y, and then Z is the sale price. And, you know,
Well, there are some industry standards, I think, right? Like the 70% rule.
yeah.
Do you go by that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think the 70% rule is great, but I have been bailed out time and time again by the fact that I think we do tend to underestimate on potential problems, and then you have to spend money to fix those problems. But luckily, if you know what you're doing on the back end and you create a beautiful home, somebody's going to be willing to pay a little bit extra, and you can cover yourself on that end. So it takes discipline, but I've been lucky to be bailed out, time and time again, because we have to be able to fix these problems when you uncover them. You can't just sell somebody a home with an inherent defect. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're not going to get into this in this episode, but you built and I sell and buy in 3 different jurisdictions, and of course, it can get super messy and 2 of the 3 of those jurisdictions, with DC and Maryland being very, 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 very hard sometimes because buyers have so many rights and they get so many disclosures and all that kind of stuff. Whereas Virginia is a buyer beware state, so it's not quite the same. But still, you never want to hand over an inferior product. Period. End of sentence.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a new build, right? Like inherently, when something's new, it's new.
Right. If you're going to slap a bunch of paint and lipstick, I mean, what do they call it? Lipstick on a pig.
Lipstick on a pig.
Yeah. I don't really subscribe to that. I think, I don't want to get those phone calls down the road. I want somebody to be like, oh, this guy really took the time to think about what he was doing here. And we appreciate the fact that we haven't had a plumbing leak, or, all of our electrical stuff works throughout the house, and we haven't had any of those issues. So yeah, it means a lot to me that people would think that way of me. So I try to sell those kinds of homes.
Well, okay. So now that we've successfully told everybody in 6 minutes to not flip a house ever in the area, no, maybe let's walk people through it though, because I think some people are curious. What actually goes into this? How does one do it? Because you watch HGTV, or you have for the last 10, 15 years, and clearly it's made for TV, and they're skipping over 7 million steps. Like, all of a sudden somebody wants a house, to put in an offer and they have it when you watch these shows, which I know is not the case. And I think with some of these shows, they actually do show a little bit more of the workmanship that's happening, but it's not the nitty gritty, not fun stuff, right? Like, you're showing people using a sledgehammer, yay, knocking down some walls or whatever. When in reality, there are a million steps before that and after. So I thought it might be helpful just to kind of explain to the listeners, what goes into this? How does it really work? What are you looking for from the, with the numbers?
Yeah.
So can you walk us through that?
Yeah, sure. So I think to start, we live in a city that has a lot of very similar homes throughout the city, right? We have these row houses that are Victorian, they're Wardmans. They have a lot of the same shapes, and there's only so much you can do inside them, right? So you're sort of limited in the square footage, but people understand that, every square foot you have is going to increase the value of your home. So how do you go into a place and say, all right, I have 1,500 square feet here existing. What can I do to increase that? So that's what I look at immediately when I go into a place, and if I'm evaluating whether or not I want to buy it. Go into the basement first. You're starting from the ground up, right? So what's your ceiling height in the basement? Some of these places have proper ceiling height, and I can back up a little bit. When you're talking about these prices that we have in DC, a lot of times you need a supplemental income in that home. So you're talking about possibly renting out your basement, or turning it into something that the rest of your family can use, perhaps your in-law suite or whatever it is that you want to do. That basement all of a sudden is no longer an unfinished space. It becomes really important to what it is that you're trying to sell. So I would go down to the basement. I would see what kind of ceiling height we have. If we need to perhaps underpin and break up the slab to literally lower the basement floor, that's a major cost, and I have to consider that. Then you go upstairs and you say, all right, we'll talk about HGTV a lot in this, but they always talk about the term good bones. Yeah, I mean, you want to look at that stuff. I mean, I think to replicate some of the baseboard from 1921 is really difficult. So if you're going to try to do that, you better know what you're doing. You need to analyze the species of the wood and understand that if you want to represent yourself as a builder that can do that, you need to know where you're going to source these kinds of things. But, you're going to look around, see the condition of the doors and the HVAC system, and probably going to need to update all the electrical. So go top to bottom. You can analyze this per building phase. So you can say, I can break this house down into 20 sub accounts and say, I have a budget for each one of these accounts. Or you can just say, this house is 1,500 square feet. I'm going to do it at a cost of X dollars per square foot. And that's my budget. And I better make it work or else I'm in big trouble. And I've done it both ways. And I tend to think that the more detailed oriented you are as a builder, it's probably going to result in a better home built and probably more profit seen at the end.
I'm going to interrupt by saying that this has gave me anxiety just listening to this. So I don't think I'm ever going to be in the camp of asking if I should flip a home. This sounds like, I mean, I know I get off budget with literally like everything in my life. So I can't imagine the stress when you're, I mean, let's not even talk about how hasn't like the price of wood gone up 4 times in the last year. So I mean, like, how do you plan that?
I try to tell people the price of lumber has gone up, and they look at you like you're a builder. You lie to us about this kind of thing all the time. And then they read an article on CNN that says literally the price of lumber has quadrupled. And it has. And we are just seeing record shortages in all sorts of materials. Supply chains have been interrupted. We can't get things the way that we used to. We have to go to different vendors. So it's been interesting trying to figure that stuff out. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry. So back on track. So, so you were saying you're looking at the bones of the house. So you're looking at the bones of the house, and you have looked at the basement, and so let's just say you determine this is a good project for you.
Yep.
Like then what? Then
what? So, you've got to raise the money, or you need to have the money figured out already going into it. I mean, you need to analyze what you think you can buy the house at, what you can sell it at, and what your budget is. So all that needs to go together. So for somebody like me, I'll go into a project thinking, this is what I would need to spend in order to get it. Because again, in this market, how many times does the house go for the actual list price? Almost never. I mean, there's going to be escalation clauses and people that are just going to straight up offer $100,000 over asking price if they're an owner occupant or they're a desperate developer that needs another project. So I have to think about those things when I go into it. But you need a couple of things to go to a bank if you don't have $1 million sitting in your account, which I don't know if you do. I certainly don't.
Nope.
So you go to a bank, you say, all right, here is my budget. Here is a spec sheet of all of the things that I think I'm going to use, perhaps Kohler fixtures and white oak hardwood and Mauser cabinets and, MDF recessed panel doors, things like that. Just you can put this all on a sheet and they'll look at this and say, okay, this person is going to build, this quality of a house that seems commensurate with the other houses in the neighborhood. You put all that together and you need to come up with some sort of a down payment to a bank to say, I'm having this skin in the game. You talk to an architect, have them draw up a very basic plan set. I mean, we're talking about them spending an hour in the house, just giving you 3 pages of a rough layout of what the house could be. Present all these things to a bank. You get approved for a loan. They say you can offer up to this amount. Here's an approval letter. I go back to you as my real estate agent and I say, this is what I want to offer on this house. Please submit this offer. And we see if we get it. And, just last thing is the amount of times that I have been second or third place of a grouping of 15 offers is more than I'd care to share. So that makes you think that you're being competitive because you're close to the top, but you're not always like drastically overpaying. But it hurts. I mean, this is a really emotional business and you have to get used to disappointment, I think.
I mean, I say that on pretty much every episode. I'm actually planning an episode based on the psychology of all these things because I think, it's incredible to me, just the mind. I can't say the word on air that I want to say, but the mind F that a lot of this stuff is. And so, I totally hear you. What's interesting is that I have always, a lot of buyers, that the misconception is that developers are sitting on $1 million in cash and that they can just win over or hand over a cash bid in 5 seconds and win. So, if maybe we're not going to convince people not to flip because it sounds like maybe if somebody really has it in their heart to want to do it, that they might be able to, and they can still be competitive. Assuming they want to pay, they might have to pay over just like everybody is right now in this market and stuff like that, but not being a developer or a known developer, what doesn't stop you from being able to buy a fixer-upper and do this yourself?
Yeah, no,
right?
it doesn't stop you at all. You just would have to understand the consequences if you all of a sudden own this big expensive asset that a lot of people wanted and it's worth a lot of money, you better figure out what to do with it pretty quickly. You better know what you're doing. I know for a fact that there are people that do this because they're either retired or looking for a career change, or they did come into some money and they just said, I think I can make this work, or I'm bored and I think, maybe we can make a couple of bucks, but it's something to do. It's experience. Maybe I can learn on this one and then make some money on the next one. And I think you get, what you pay for sometimes is a really expensive asset that is a lot more complicated than you would imagine. So yeah, I mean, if you're one of those people, you're a type A person, you're hyper organized, and you know a little bit about construction, probably would be a good idea for you to explore this as an option. But those people are not really out there all that frequently. So
Yeah, I mean, something else I always think about too is, I love design. I've done a number of episodes about, design and putting things together, staging, things like that I enjoy. But if I really wanted to do work, I don't think I even have the crew to do things. That's something I think about when people talk to me about wanting to do a flip. Like, it's hard to find good help, I feel like, because this is a city made up of a lot of professionals who work in office settings, at computers. It's not a lot of people who are working with their hands and who can do a lot of this work. And so I just do feel like people who can do construction, electrical, plumbing, they're in high demand and they're not falling off of trees waiting to do your flip, right? And so I've always thought to myself, like, how would I actually have the right crew who would prioritize my job and help me with my work if I was going to try to do a flip?
Yeah. I think a lot about, Mike Rowe, the Dirty Jobs guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One time he spoke in front of Congress and he said, he was giving a speech about, just trade school basically. And the advantages of trying to learn trade as opposed to things like going to college or taking some sort of professional career. And he said, a good plumber in a few years is going to cost more than a good psychiatrist. And that's true because they are in such high demand at this point. You're going to look for your subcontractors thinking that they're a dime a dozen, and sometimes they are, but the good ones are not. And it's not only that, but it's their backlog of work. I mean, these guys are identified by other developers before you've even walked through the front door, and they're the type that says, all right, I want to control these 3 jobs and I need you on my jobs, and I'm willing to pay you to make sure that you prioritize me over somebody else. So if you're going to seek out a good plumber, they're going to give you a number that may not be the same number that they would give somebody they work with all the time. And if you've never done this before, you need to understand that difference. So what can you do to avoid that? You can get multiple bids from multiple plumbers, framers, electricians, all these guys. And they are going to be of varying levels of qualification. And that's really going to be up to you to figure that part out. But you're absolutely right. I mean, I think even though we have a really good worker pool in this area, DMV, you get people from contractors from Maryland, Virginia, even West Virginia. They're going to be the guys that are really constantly busy. So if somebody is really ready and willing to jump at your job immediately, maybe there's a reason for that. So it's just something to consider, I think.
It's hard. I mean, it's like that. Even we're not talking about flipping homes, just to kind of go off on a tangent, just to find somebody to help you with, like, I need to I need to do stuff with my windows here.
Yeah.
And I mean, finding the person that doesn't have, a 3-month wait is forever. And I'm like, well, I work in an industry of immediacy, right? Everybody wants everything from me ASAP, and with good reason. I mean, with home sales and stuff, you have to. But I've found that I kind of want stuff done right away too. But I have to remind myself of this. Like, listen, do you want the person who's going to do it right? Or, if they're going to rip a hole out of your front of your house and put in a different size window, like, do you want somebody to slap something in there? Or do you want it to be done right? Of course, I want it to be done right. I mean, what were you going to say?
Instant gratification. I mean, I think we all feel that way. And like, if anything is not really going to be an instant gratification business, it's going to be the process of building a home, which, takes several months to do. And if somebody thinks they can fix, a serious problem quickly, they, may not be right about that. But, I don't know. I mean, I personally feel like to have those guys that you're talking about, those guys or girls that just are always the ones that know how to fix those problems, and to have them in, your phone and as a trusted source, because I think what you just said is a really good point. Is I'm going, say we're talking about flipping a house and you recognize a couple of problems and you don't know how to fix that problem. You say, I can see the problem, I just don't know how to fix it. So who do I even go to find this problem? Like, if there's a roof leak, do you call a roofer? If there's mold, who do you call? A mold remediator, I guess. I mean, those companies are really expensive. I mean, there's other people that can do all of these things. And do you want to have your own crew of guys that are jack of all trades, or do you want to hire subcontractors that are specialists in each individual trade?
Yeah, and I mean, and also it's like, how do you evaluate what's a good price and stuff too? Like, I'm in the industry, you're in the well, you're way in this industry, but like I know approximately how much it should cost for mold remediation right now
Mm-hmm.
because I work in selling and buying homes and helping people with those things.
Yeah.
If you're looking to get into flipping, I feel like you really need to do a ton of research and or rely on somebody you trust to give you some like feedback. Cause I mean, you can find everything on the internet these days, right?
Yeah.
You can find somebody who tells you, oh, it should cost $2,000, but they're writing the article in West Virginia. And it's not what it's going to cost in DC, right? So it's like, who do you trust? Who can actually tell you this is what you're looking for? And the person is going to help you. This is the approximate price range. Like it's just a lot of learning to get to the point where you can successfully do this with as little stress as possible.
Yeah. And I think about like you and I, so like 6 years ago we met, and we have met several people in this industry before then and since then. And like, I've picked up little bits of information from everybody that I've met, because there is no school to learn how to flip a house. There's the people that you can go to ask pointed questions, and sometimes they'll give you that information, sometimes they won't. But you have to be a sponge. And I know that's like every profession ever. That's kind of a cliche, but like, I really, truly have just everything that I know about this business, I've learned from somebody else, or I've learned by screwing it up myself once and then realizing like how to not do that again.
So do you have any and you might not, but do you have any hard and fast rules about flipping? Like people will tell you the 70% rule, or are there any other things that you're just like, this is a keeper. This is not you should do this. You shouldn't do that. Anything that you can pass on to people who are still considering doing this?
Yeah. Like, I mean, the very basic, pieces of advice I could give is that you just have no idea what you're going to expect. When you're going to go into these places and you want to create the same layout, you're going to learn so much if you do it multiple times. But that first time, it's going to be so foreign to you. I remember my very first job as a building contractor. I didn't know what a 2x4 was, and I became a project supervisor. And I had to learn and take like a class about construction, but not about flipping homes. So you just had to pick up these things over time. I recognize that when people ask me these questions, I see them nodding their heads and they're like sort of going along with what I'm saying. But truly, like, it's like somebody explaining rocket science to me. Like, I'm going to sort of catch a word here and there that I'll understand. And I think I can put it together, but I really don't know what it is that they're saying. So you have to kind of rely on some of these professionals. I would say, try not to overcomplicate things, right? Like, there is a happy medium between completely gutting and renovating a house and just doing the lipstick and paint and carpet thing. I think layout changes are great. But do you really need to remove all the doors? I think appliances, cabinets, that stuff, that's pretty easy to do. But if you're going to keep the same exact dated kitchen layout, maybe that's not going to be for everybody. So do you reroute some of that stuff? And then you get into the plumbing and the electrical. So to rely on like a couple of good professionals, like an architect, like your real estate agent, perhaps one other person that that's flipping houses, that's probably a really good set of people to rely on to ask questions to help guide you through the process.
Yeah, it's something I've always told people is don't expect to make money on your first one.
Yeah.
Like I try setting people up to say, if you come out even, then that's a success for your first one, because obviously you don't want to lose any money. And it sets you up that if you do make money, great. Right. But like the experience, you need to get that experience somewhere. So either if you work with somebody else, or you let someone lets you tag along to do a flip, which like a normal person who's just talked about getting to flip probably won't have that opportunity. Like I would maybe, or you did in the beginning, but unless that's the case, I'd say come out even and not not negative. And like, that's a win.
Yeah,
first flip.
It is. I mean, you don't want to lose money. Certainly. I think you can get spoiled if you make a lot of money up front, because certain projects that look like they're going to be great turn out to be dogs, and ones that you think are really thin can be great because you just could be in a really great area that you didn't realize was going to be so great. Maybe the best restaurant in town. I mean, there was a place I did in Petworth. All of a sudden it was close to Upshur, and I didn't realize that all these great restaurants were going to pop up, and we sold the house at the perfect time, and it worked out really well for us. But yeah, I mean, finding that right property isn't always going to be all of it. I mean, to do your research and have all those pieces of information I talked about, your lender, your budget, your spec sheet, your bank understands that all those things are going to go together, and they're going to say, here's your loan, and we think that you're going to do well on this, so you can offer up to this amount because we see that you have your budget and we think that you can make X amount of dollars. They wouldn't finance you if they saw that you were going to do it and break even, and they were the only ones that were going to make money on the deal. I promise you. I think
it's good to know.
I think banks are not necessarily as evil as everybody makes them out to be when it comes to stuff like this. They're in the business of good business, and they want to make sure that you're successful, because I think it's great. You teach somebody how to fish, they're going to keep going back and fishing and fishing. And I know that I've done several of these flips with the same bankers because I think we have a good working relationship. And I think somebody else that wants to start out that way, you got to seek out those relationships.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I mean, I think basically what we're saying is it's not the end, not that nobody should try flipping, but just that you need to go in with your eyes completely wide open. And hopefully you have somebody or some people that are guiding you in the right place, right? Mm-hmm. Like somebody in DC, not just like some random HGTV article about how to do it.
Yeah.
And then, we go on your own happy way and start flipping homes.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate
it. Thanks for having me.
Maybe we'll have you on again for some other stuff down the road, and I hope you have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Thanks.